Welcome to Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark. Be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Hope everyone's having a grand day. When I went to the Trafficking College, J.J. Brunetti, this is one of the things at the very first parts of it, the Miami Declaration of Principles of Human Trafficking. And I think a lot of people need to know a lot about these different things, which I had learned as well. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use to the balance in favor of fair use. Hope everyone's having a great day. Come in and say hello. Thank you so much. I started out reading about abuse. Abuse affects our lives in so many ways. What do we do when we are too scared to tell? We have trusted someone and they did not help. Sometimes someone asks, "What did you do to get punished this way?" Abuse is abuse. Abuse is not punishment. Abuse is torture, crippling, and debilitating. What advice would you give others to help them through their horrendous memories? Are you there for the person, or are you part of the knife in your friend or relative's back, since you may have turned a blind eye to it? Are you claiming to advocate against abuse but condemn the people who tell and share their stories? Do you want to be a part of the solution or part of the problem? Let's stand united and discuss ways in which we may help others. What ways have helped you in your healing journey? Are you in a constant battle fighting the negative forces within? Stop. Let's encourage one another. Are you an officer in the judicial system not doing your job to help the victim? That means you are not doing your duty. Your duty is to serve and protect. How do we open the public's eyes so they can acknowledge and feel the need to help protect the children and our citizens? The children are our future. You matter. Hey, Jackie, good to see you. Thanks for coming in, girl. Lots of love. To start off, let me show you what the Miami Declaration of Principles. Oh man, it went over here to the part over here. It's got a download part here, which I did go ahead and download. So let's see if it's over here hiding. Every time I change the screen, it kind of like goes Ari. It's a button. Hello there. So let's share the screen here. Hey, Chris Miller, good to see you. First, this is a Miami Declaration of Human Trafficking. Its Genesis and Purpose by Rosa Patty. This is a recommended citation with the Miami Declaration of Principles. She was the lady that was given the presentation over at the sex trafficking, the human trafficking, where I got a degree just for the 5 days of going in attendance. Just a certificate, not a degree, sorry. The Miami Declaration of Principles on Human Trafficking, its genesis and purpose. Libya is running. Let me go down here. Let's tell who she is. She is an executive director at St. Thomas University School of Law graduate program in intercultural human rights. She has taught courses on health and human rights and introduction to human rights law. Formerly a member of parliament and a cabinet member serving as a secretary a state for youth and women of Albania. Miss Patty has been actively involved in the fight against human trafficking. She represented her country in the United Nations Congress World Against Sexual Commercial Exploitation of Children in Stockholm, August 1996, and has conducted research on and participated in a series of conferences against human trafficking in the Vatican, Rome, Turin, and Milan. She has studied English language and literature as well as law at the University of Tirana, graduate as the valedictorian, summa cum laude, of the charter class of the Master of Laws program in Intercultural Human Rights, and is a Doctor IUR in Law, candidate at the University of Potsdam Faculty of Law. So go back up here. It's talking about Lilia is running through featureless streets, bruised and bleeding, to the accompaniment of heavy, nihilistic rock music, running from her fate. Probably so. Okay, and it says it's got an explanation for number one. So number one says it's Peter Bradshaw. He did Lilia Forever in The Guardian, April 25th, 2003. That's a story he did. Probably so. As the movie unfolds, the audience is experiencing an emotional roller coaster of cruelty and devastation, the human vulnerability, and the realistic horror of working days in the hell of prostitution. This is only one piece of which dovetails into the bleak puzzle of the most horrible story of our time, modern day slavery as an ever growing global threat to the lives of freedom of millions of men, women, and children. In order to challenge this affront to human dignity, the concerted effort of the community of nations as a whole, focusing on protection and rehabilitation of victims as well as on deterrence of such conduct, is mandatory. Academia is part and parcel of the struggle against trafficking in persons, not only by fulfilling its role, try to get scroll up right here, as a vanguard of exploration of ideas as well as authoritative place for the collection and dissemination of knowledge, but also by providing that neutral haven for open and uncensored discourse regarding the best and the most effective ways in accessing societal problems and development of solutions. With this in mind, St. Thomas University School of Law and its graduate program in intercultural human rights, under the kind auspices of Reverend Monsignor Franklin M. Casale, President of St. Thomas University, and Bob Butterworth, Dean of the School of Law, have hosted and organized a set of major events designed to propel and refine the fight against trafficking in persons. So on November 12th, 2004, the St. Thomas University School of Law with CBS Channel 4, the National Italian American Foundation, and the Miami Herald sponsored and hosted an international conference entitled Invisible Chains, Breaking the Ties of Trafficking in Persons. The conference was inspired by the TV series Invisible Chains, in which chief investigative reporter of CBS Channel 4 TV, Ms. Michelle Gillen, presented a shocking expose documenting human trafficking on U.S. soil. The conference featured representatives of government, academic institutions, religious groups, non-governmental organizations, and the media, as well as survivors of human trafficking who detailed information on this egregious violation of human rights. Our goal in this conference was to increase awareness and initiate a dialogue on possible solutions to the problem of this terrible crime, which is a flagrant assault on human dignity. The novelty of the conference consisted in creating a forum for the voice of the victim to be heard. Mr. Francis Bach, you got the modern day slavery right here. It says the book has received outstanding reviews from Entertainment Weekly, Publishers Weekly, the Boston Globe. So um, he's a former child slave from Sudan and Esperanza, a survivor who escaped enslavement on U.S. soil, brought their unbelievably shocking and compelling stories to a stunned audience of over 300 people. U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, the Honorable Jim Nicholson, one of the great leaders of the effort to bring an end to this scourge. Ambassador John Miller, Director of the U.S. Department of State Office to Combat and Monitor Trafficking in Persons, spirited coordinator of the frontline struggle. It just got a list of names right here, right? It says the conference concluded that in order to break the ties of the myriad of forms of trafficking in humans, coordination of the earnest efforts of many working towards a final goal is critical. In order to develop such a common approach to effectively address the problem, an interdisciplinary working symposium for academic experts, intergovernmental, governmental, and non governmental practitioners and students was convened on February the 10th, 2005, at St. Thomas University of Law. For the benefit of the victims, participants agreed to cut across foundational differences in approach in order to formulate a working consensus on policies designed to confront the problem head on. The event was named Addressing the Scourge on Human Trafficking, International and Domestic Solutions. So let's go back out of here. I'm going to show y'all the actual list of the policies. Hey there, Peggy. Good to see you too. I got to get right here to maximize the screen again and have to play with it. I hate how this keeps messing it up. Okay, got it over here. Sorry, but so let's get to the window. Here's the Miami Declaration of Principles on Human Trafficking, drafted by intergovernmental, governmental, non-governmental, and academic experts at Interdisciplinary Symposium in Miami, Florida, February the 10th, 2005. The preamble. Today, slavery is illegal in nearly every country on the face of this planet. Yet 600,000 to 2 million people are trafficked across international borders annually, and millions more are trafficked within borders. And just imagine it's probably even escalated a lot more since then, because this was 2005. It's 20 years, right? And then an estimated 27 million people toil under conditions of personal servitude around the world. Human trafficking has become the third largest source of profits for organized crime, generating billions of dollars each year. In order to combat this egregious and growing threat to human dignity, the government leaders, scholars, expert practitioners, and students present at the Symposium on Human Trafficking held on the campus of St. Thomas University Law School on February the 10th, 2005, hosted by the law school's graduate program in intercultural human rights and its intercultural human rights law review, shared their expertise, engaged in thorough problem and policy-oriented discussion, and formulated the following set of consensus principles to recommend to decision makers and practitioners around the world. The Miami Declaration of Human Trafficking. Trafficking in persons is a human rights violation that constitutes a contemporary form of slavery. It is defined as the action of recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction or fraud or deception, of the abuse of power or of the position of vulnerability or of the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation, including, at a minimum, the exploitation of the prostitution of others, or other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. Y'all see that? It does not just have one definition there. 2. Trafficking in persons also typically violates other basic human rights, especially the right of the victim to be free from slavery or servitude, the right of the victim to life, liberty, and security of person, the right of the victim to be free from torture or cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment, the right of the victim to health, the right of the victim to freedom of movement and residence, and the right of the victim to free choice of employment. It also includes the commission of serious crimes against persons, in many cases rape, assault, and torture, as well as crimes against states, often including money laundering, tax evasion, and violations of immigration rules. Trafficking in persons is to be considered a crime against humanity, just as genocide, enslavement, and torture are. As such, its commission triggers universal jurisdiction. It should also be recognized as a violation of just conscience, a breach of the peremptory norms of international law. Victims of trafficking in person are to be treated with dignity, fairness, and respect for the human rights. Among these rights are the right to safety, the right to privacy, the right to information, the right to legal representation, the right to be heard in court, the right to compensation for damages, the right to medical assistance, the right to social assistance, the right to seek residence, and the right to return to their country of origin. Number 5. States should recognize that the roots of human trafficking include vulnerabilities based upon age, poverty, lack of education, unemployment or underemployment, gender discrimination, as well as the non-enforcement of laws on the registration of births, the age of marriage, and the age of majority. 6. States should ratify and implement relevant and appropriate international legal instruments on human rights and trafficking in persons. 7. States should adopt and implement the laws and administrative structures needed to support international cooperation and assistance in preventing, investigating, and prosecuting cases of human trafficking. Well, they tried to stop some of mine and when I was younger. States should establish direct channels of communication between their border control agencies and law enforcement agencies. They should initiate or expand efforts to gather and analyze data on trafficking in persons, including on the means and methods used on the situation, the magnitude, the nature, and the economics of trafficking in persons, particularly of women and children. States should share such information as appropriate with law enforcement agencies and other agencies of countries of origin, transit, and destination, as well as with international law enforcement agencies such as Interpol. In some of these studies, it's even got whether it's trafficking of boys and men. And there's a couple safe places for the young men to go because there's a lot of times there's nothing available for the boys or men, right? We need more places that's safe for the boys and the men who were victimized. Number nine, states should provide, strengthen, and cooperate internationally in training for law enforcement personnel, customs and immigration officials, prosecutors and judges, and other relevant officials on the issue of trafficking in persons. The training should focus on the methods used in preventing such trafficking, prosecuting the traffickers, and protecting the rights of victims of trafficking. You understand this? They need to be trained more on these methods, okay? Prosecuting, we know they really need more training on prosecuting the traffickers, right? Protecting the rights of victims of trafficking. Even the victims of sexual abuse, they need to stand up firmly against them as well. And protecting the rights of victims of trafficking, including protecting the victims from the traffickers. This training should also take into account the need to consider human rights, be sensitive to child and gender issues, as well as linguistic, cultural, ethnic, and religious aspects of the problem, and it should encourage cooperation with non governmental organizations and other elements of civil society. Two, legal sanction and enforcement strategies. 10. Trafficking in persons is an egregious criminal activity often perpetrated by individuals or by organized transnational criminal groups. Trafficking in persons is often linked with the laundering of illicit proceeds, thus making prosecution and confiscation particularly difficult. A comprehensive approach to trafficking should include prosecution of the traffickers, prevention of the act of trafficking, and protection of the victims of trafficking. In addition, trafficking is often a transnational crime that warrants the development and implementation of transnational policies, in particular, the imposition of extraterritorial sanctions, extradition, and exchange of information. 11. States should recognize trafficking in persons as a specific and serious crime in their domestic laws in particular. States have the responsibility to enact domestic anti trafficking laws that can be applied extraterritorially. Penalties for trafficking must reflect the severity of the offense. I'm going to turn on my lamp right here. Maybe it'll help me see it a little bit better. States should enact legislation to recognize as crimes all forms of sexual exploitation. You see that? All forms of sexual exploitation. Include trafficking for the purpose of prostitution, trafficking for the purpose of pornography, trafficking for the purpose of providing mail order brides and household help, as well as sex tourism. 13. States are urged to curtail demand for commercial sexual services and punish all actors involved in the trafficking scheme, including the principals of the scheme, other members of the criminal association, as well as facilitators. 14. Corporations should be held criminally liable for the commission of the crime of trafficking in persons. Also, corporate officials in a position of relevant authority who know or should have known that the corporation derives a financial benefit from the labor of a trafficked person should be held criminally liable for their complicity in the crime of trafficking in persons. 15. States should fight corruption and punish public officials who facilitate or participate in the trafficking enterprise. Exactly. Exactly. That's what we've been saying. 16. States are urged to fully prosecute cases of trafficking and to commit adequate funding to this task. I'm tired of a lot of them getting bond. How about y'all? 17. As part of their responsibility to prosecute cases of trafficking, states should provide special training to law enforcement officials, border officials, and judges on methods of detecting, investigating, and prosecuting cases of trafficking in persons and related crimes. Adequate training and funding for state and local law enforcement is imperative. 18. States should recognize and implement in their domestic laws trafficking in persons as an extraditable offense, and they should include this offense in their extradition treaties and practices. Then it's got immigration policies right here. 19. States should recognize that trafficking is a crime that is not dependent on the person's immigration status, and benefits should be granted to victims of trafficking irrespective of their immigration status. 20. States should have immigration policies reasonably calculated to meet domestic labor needs. Uh, Immigrants are often vulnerable to trafficking because they do not have legal immigrant status but have migrated in response to the destination country's unmet demand for labor. Moreover, such migration creates instability for the migrants' remaining family in the country of origin, thereby creating a secondary vulnerable population. States should allow victims of trafficking to apply for a protective status, allowing them to remain in the state's territory. And if found to be valid, states should grant the relief. Victims should have recourse to all other opportunities to apply for immigration status. States should recognize the relation between underlying crimes and the larger definition of trafficking. Victims of trafficking should not be deported without having the opportunity to apply for such protective status. 22. Immigration related benefits should not be made unreasonably contingent upon the victim's cooperation with the prosecution of their traffickers. 23. No state, including countries of destination, transit of origin, or of human trafficking, should impose immigration penalties on victims of trafficking who repatriate. The victim's repatriation should thus not adversely affect his or her chances of future immigration to the transit or destination state. 24. It is the responsibility of the government of the victim's citizenship to issue or provide valid identity documents promptly to trafficking victims. I believe as long as you don't try to change our laws and try to do, you come here, don't try to cause trouble. Don't try to squash our laws in our country. 25. This is protection and reintegration of victims of trafficking. States should sponsor training and support efforts to train NGOs and legal counsel in all the dimensions of human trafficking. This includes training in the identification of victims of trafficking and their social, health, and legal needs. 26. States should sponsor training and support efforts to train law enforcement officers, judicial and other administrative officials, as well as members of governmental agencies who may have contact with trafficked persons in all the dimensions of human trafficking. This includes training in the identification of victims of trafficking and their social, health, and legal needs. 27. Government has a responsibility to find and identify victims of trafficking and assist them to come forward without fear of prosecution or retaliation. To this end, states should develop identification measures which distinguish trafficking in human beings from various forms of exploitation from illegal migration and smuggling. Put the two different, learn to distinguish the two, okay? Multiple means should be used to help victims of trafficking come forward, such as hotlines, drop-in centers, and direct victim outreach. 28. The trafficked person must be recognized as a victim of the crime of trafficking. States must not criminalize the status of the trafficked person and should not penalize the victim for illegal acts, such as illegal immigration or prostitution, incident or related to the trafficking act. State 29. States should provide victims of trafficking with all protective and reintegrative services, the minimum of which includes safety planning, health services, legal services, culturally appropriate mental health services, as well as safe and secure housing. This is just the Miami. 29. States should provide victims of trafficking with all protective and reintegrative services, the minimum of which includes safety planning, health services, legal services, culturally appropriate mental health services, as well as safe and secure housing. I believe we should help some, but we need to help a lot of our own people too. If they come to destroy our country, they need to go. Victims should not be forced or coerced into cooperating with the prosecution of perpetrators, nor should they be penalized for failing to testify. 31. Safety and privacy of the victims should be of the highest priority. Governments have the responsibility to ensure that witness protection programs are available to victims of trafficking and the family members before, during, and after investigations and prosecution. Protection measures, especially police protection measures, should be available to all victims in need, not only to those that acted as witnesses. 32. Benefits granted to a victim of trafficking should also be extended to members of the victim's family as well. 32, 33, preventative measures should include, as a minimum, programs promoting the empowerment of women and the full participation to the economic and social life of the countries of origin. 2. Policies promoting education, social protection, and economic development. 3. Measures to reduce the demand for prostitution, other commercial sexual services, cheap labor, and any other activity that could foster trafficking in persons. 4. Measures to survey migration patterns and ensure legal and safe labor migration. Let's see what else is here. So, 34. Governments have the responsibility to cooperate with non governmental organizations, including faith based organizations, to allow them the freedom to work, to consult with them, and taking the necessary measures to combat trafficking in persons and to assist the victims. Moreover, a system of identification, assistance, protection, and social inclusion of trafficked persons should be based on regular cooperation between public institutions and social actors, especially law enforcement, prosecution, migration authorities, local authorities, NGOs, and other relevant actors and service providers at the national and local level. 35. Countries of origin and destination have the responsibility to cooperate, exchange information, and provide for mutual assistance in order to 1. Develop joint actions against trafficking and prevent overlaps. 2. Promote law enforcement and judicial collaboration. And 3. Facilitate contacts between embassies and consular authorities. Number 36. States should facilitate the repatriation of victims of trafficking. If they wish to return to their home country, governments have also the responsibility to ensure the reintegration of victims of trafficking in their communities by issuing identity documents and provided them with employment or education opportunities. 37. Research, information, networking, education, and mass media campaigns are crucial for the fight against trafficking in persons. Research is important to assess the scope of the problem, identify the victims, study methods to reduce the demand of all those activities, foster trafficking in person, determine the special needs of child victims, suggest further tools to combat trafficking in persons, and highlight the link between trafficking and HIV/AIDS. Academic institutions should play a vital role in this field. 38. Awareness campaigns spreading information about trafficking issues should target the general public, the business community, and policymakers in order to create the environment that does not accept any form of trafficking. They should also address specific groups such as potential victims, customers, business owners, border officials, law enforcement personnel, and diplomatic authorities. Such campaigns should warn about the risk of trafficking as well as the harm of prostitution and inform about the benefits available to victims of trafficking. The media can play a crucial role by acting as a multiplier and ensure the outreach of the campaign by launching a systematic effort in several countries at the same time, thereby creating synergies and effective peer pressure. 39. States should consider the creation of an international list of missing persons, which would be particularly helpful in the identification of victims and potential victims, such as unaccompanied children. 40 states, in cooperation with IGOs and NGOs, should identify and review best practices in the field of trafficking in persons, including policies, programs, and existing laws, in order to study their impact in the reduction of trafficking. 41. States should provide IGOs and NGOs that are involved in the fight against trafficking in persons with the appropriate funds and resources to effectively perform their mandate. 42. States should periodically self-assess their action against trafficking in persons to evaluate the effectiveness of their laws and policies and take measures to correct them where appropriate. These were a list of the um, experts right here. I just showed it without reading it all. So it just goes on. Give them credit where credit is due. And if anybody wanted to call that director right there, Professor Dr. Rosa Patty, she's the founder and director of John J. Bernetti Human Trafficking Academy, St. John Paul II Distinguished Professor of Law, Director Graduate Program in Intercultural Human Rights. There's her number. There's her website, www.stu.edu/human rights. Let me close that out. Yeah, close it out. So let's go back over here. Hey there, good to see you, Arlene. Thanks for coming in. I hope this helps give out information about this Miami Declaration of Principles on Human Trafficking. I think it's interesting. I'll share more of the different things that I have learned, the different topics during this. See, we've got familial um, sex trafficking. It's got on the different, like the gangs on, like the MS-13s and different things. So y'all just let me know if y'all are interested on me continue on with the different studies with this. Let's say God bless y'all. Y'all have a wonderful, happy New Year. God bless y'all. And at the top of the screen, you'll see a little code, and you can scan it and that gives you access to where my book is if y'all want to purchase my book, Born to Live in Hell, version 2.0. Thank you so much, and God bless each and every one of y'all. Got to get the word out.